Rise with me for a moment of silence and the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, roll call, please, Beth.
Jankvist,
Here.
Langy,
Here.
Merrill,
Here.
Murin, Jackson, Faust, File.
Here.
Okay, we are going to move straight into the swearing in of our newest council member, Jared Dahlcutter. Jared, if you would come up.
Better sworn in. Better sworn in.
I
Jared Dahlcutter,
do solemnly swear that I will support
do solemnly swear that I will support
and defend the Constitution of the United States
and defend the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Nebraska
and the Constitution of the State of Nebraska
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same,
that I take this obligation freely
that I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation or for purpose of evasion,
without any mental reservation or for purpose of evasion,
and that I will faithfully and impartially perform
and that I will faithfully and impartially perform
the duties of the office of Ward 4 City Council Member according to law,
the duties of the office of Ward 4 City Council Member according to law
and to the best of my ability.
and to the best of my ability.
And I do further swear that I do not advocate,
And I do further swear that I do not advocate,
nor am I a member of any political party or organization
nor am I a member of any political party or organization
that advocates the overthrow of the government of the United States
that advocates the overthrow of the government of the United States
or of this state by force or violence,
or of this state by force or violence,
and that during such time as I am in this position,
and that during such time as I am in this position,
I will not advocate nor become a member
I will not advocate or become a member
of any political party or organization
of any political party or organization
that advocates the overthrow of the government of the United States or of this state,
that advocates the overthrow of the government of the United States,
or of this state by force or violence.
or of this state by force or violence.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Have you signed that? And we'll do roll call. Just-
Okay.
It's official. Jared, come on up. All right, as Jared gets situated here, we will go through roll call again with the full council of members present. Go ahead, Beth.
Granquist,
Here.
Langy,
Here.
Merrill,
Here.
Dahlketter,
Here.
Murin, Jackson, Faust, File.
Here.
Okay, with that, I would look for a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved. Second.
Motion second. If no discussion on that, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative.
I would look for a motion to approve the full agenda.
So moved, Your Honor.
Second.
Okay, no discussion, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative.
That moves us to the special presentations part of the agenda, item number 24, proclamation for March 2018 as Problem Gambling Awareness Month. Problem Gambling Awareness Month, whereas there are individuals and families in our community adversely affected by problem gambling, and compulsive gambling is often hidden from family members, social services, and mental health professionals, and compulsive gambling often occurs in combination with other disorders such as chemical dependency and depression, and it is important to raise awareness of the warning signs of compulsive gamblers and connect them with professional help. Now, therefore, I, Josh Boning, Mayor of the City of Norfolk, by the power vested in me, do hereby proclaim the month of March 2018 as Problem Gambling Awareness Month. Is there anyone here to receive the proclamation tonight? I don't think so. So we'll move on to the next item, number 25, proclamation for February 27th, 2018 is Spay Day USA. Spay Day USA, whereas cats and dogs provide companionship and share the homes of hundreds of individuals in Norfolk, and the problem of pet overpopulation is the reason for the cost of animal control and animal pound expense for Norfolk taxpayers. And animal pounds and shelters throughout the country must euthanize approximately 4 million cats and dogs each year, although many of them are healthy and adoptable due to the lack of critical resources such as money, space, and good adoptive homes. And spaying and neutering cats and dogs, among other animal companions, has been shown to drastically reduce pet overpopulation. And veterinarians, national and local animal welfare organizations, and private citizens have joined together again this year to advocate and support the spaying and neutering of companion animals on Spay Day USA 2018. Therefore, be it resolved that I, Josh Moaning, Mayor of the City of Norfolk, Nebraska, by the power vested in me, do hereby proclaim February 27th, 2018 as Spay Day USA. Is there anyone here tonight to receive the proclamation? Thanks for being here. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Well, I could. I'm Andrea Lindner. I'm the corporate contact for Heartland Animal Advocates in Norfolk. And I'm also proud to say I'm a volunteer for the Animal Shelter of Northeast Nebraska. And I'm delighted that you have proclaimed the 27th as Spay Day. There are many advantages to spay neutering animals, in addition to just the goal of reducing the unnecessary euthanization of animals who find their way to hounds and shelters and just cannot be adopted because there just aren't enough homes for all of them. We also, I did bring a handout I could leave here, but we have 4 groups of, and I'm not representing all of them, but we have 4 groups with very good people working with them or volunteering in them in animal welfare. And we have the Animal Shelter of Northeast Nebraska. We have Fur Baby Incorporated, Heartland Animal Advocates that I'm a member of, and Puppy Love Shelter. And I do have, should I just leave it up here, maybe a handout? I don't know how many people are aware of the contact telephone numbers or mailing addresses for these organizations. We have some very good people, and all of them are definitely in favor of spay neutering as a way to save lots of lives of dear animal companions. So thank you.
Very good, thank you. Any information you can leave on the back table and people can grab as they leave. Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, we will move into the public hearings and related action portion of the agenda. Item number 27, I will open this public hearing regarding Community Development Block Grant number 14-CR-007, Phase 2 Comprehensive Revitalization Project. And to kick off the discussion here, Jan Merrill from the Northeast Nebraska Economic Development District is here to join us. Evening, Jan.
A second public hearing is required for all CDBG-funded projects to obtain citizen input, comments, or opinions in regards to the performance of the program. On August 29, 2014, the City of Norfolk was awarded $150,000 of CDBG funds for the 14-CR-007 Phase 2 Comprehensive Redevelopment Project. Activities to be completed in a target area included $81,000 for 12-inch water main reconstruction under Madison Avenue between 1st and 7th Street, $50,000 for single-family rental rehab, $4,000 for housing management, $3,000 for lead-based lead-based paint risk assessment and testing, and $12,000 for general admin for the project. The city of Norfolk provided $81,000 in matching funds towards the water main reconstruction. In July of 2015, the city requested a budget amendment to reallot $50,000 for single-family housing rental rehab to single-family owner-occupied rehab. Originally, property owners participating in the housing rental rehab program would have provided a one-to-one match towards the housing program. However, the city's OOR program did not require a one-to-one match for the homeowner. Therefore, the one-to-one match that was required came from the Norfolk Housing Agency Housing Reuse Program. The total estimated project cost for this phase was $281,000. To date, $81,000 of CDBG funds and $81,000 of matching funds from the city has been expended for the Madison Avenue Sewer Project, $14,776 of housing for OOR owner-occupied rehab, $30,179 for housing management and lead clearance, and $9,893 for general admin. Due to the lack of eligible property owners, the city will deobligate $35,224 of the housing OOR funds, which is the owner-occupied rehab funds, and $3,821 of the housing management funds.
Okay. Any questions for Jan on that? Okay, Jan, I think another important CDBG resource in terms of infrastructure improvement and housing restoration, so thank you. No further discussion on that. I will close the hearing and we'll move to item number 28, open a public hearing to discuss the 2018 through 2023 1- and 6-year street improvement plan. And to open the hearing, I'd ask Steve to kick it off for us, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Before you, included in your council packets, is the proposed 1- and 6-year plan. This plan is essentially an extension of the plan that we had in place last year. We just did bump it forward 1 year. We have done some modifications to how we want to, when we want to start some of the projects, basically advancing some of the engineering services so we can get design moving on those a little bit earlier, take care of any utility modifications that might need to be done with private utilities, and then proceed with construction. There's 12 projects listed on the plan, and I'll kind of walk through those. The first 2 are the miscellaneous work by contract. These are street repair projects where we need to get in and repair panels, repair curb and gutter around the community. We've identified that. I think this is a little bit new to the plan, and we've identified that going forward at about $650,000 a year, and that'll do a nice job in improving a lot of our intersections and some of our major corridors, getting that broken concrete out of there, restoring some drainage to those areas. Number 3 would be 8th Street from Michigan Avenue to Omaha Avenue. $50,000 there to finish the design on that, and then $600,000 for construction in year 2020. Number 4, miscellaneous paving for residential districts. That has to do with just as developers are working on their subdivisions. There's a portion of that the city participates in. You can see it's a fairly minor amount, and so we budget about $30,000 a year for that. The box culvert, number 6, would be the box culvert on South 5th Street over Corporation Gulch. That is scheduled for some rework in 2019. Widening Benjamin, number 7, widening Benjamin Avenue from 4-lane to 5-lane, from 13th Street east to 1st Street. This is one of those that we've advanced some engineering services So we could start engineering late 2019, continue engineering in 2020, and then take advantage of a little bit of time in there for any major utility relocations that would be in that area. We are anticipating some involving NPPD and other private utilities. We would also use that time to acquire any additional right-of-way that we would need for that project, and then we're allowing 2 years for construction. Number 9 would be a reconstruction of Brosh Avenue from First Street to Fifth Street. That is a project that we are currently have an RFP out for engineering services on. We would select an engineer later this month and start design on that early spring. And then that would be ready for construction in about a year from now. We would be anticipated awarded contract for construction. Number 10, reconstruction Norfolk Avenue, Cottonwood to the flood control. That project is out there quite a ways, currently planned for 2023 to start design on that, and then 2024, 2025 for reconstruction. Number 11 would be Prospect Avenue between 27th Street and Ridgeway. There has been about 50% of the engineering on that is in place. We need to finish up the engineering and then go to construction, and we would anticipate construction 2021. The final project or projects on the list are number 12. That is a series of bridge maintenance improvements. The map of the plan, those are the blue dots on the map of the plan. Those are cosmetic and functional. Some bridge approach replacements. We have some bearing pads that have deteriorated that need to be replaced. Guardrail replacements, maybe some painting in a couple areas. We are doing deck repair on a couple of those. Would be partial depth deck repair to remove any bad concrete, rehab the decks. So that would constitute the 1 and 6 year plan. We did have a public hearing a couple weeks ago, just to present the plan, gather any public input. We did have a section that was suggested, and we will consider that for next year's plan. There will be a additional process here throughout the year as we prepare or start to look at the next 1 and 6 year plan. We want to make that a more involved process with the community as we go forward. And so look forward to hearing more from you about that in the future. Any questions on any of these projects I can answer?
Steve, on the bridge reconstruction situation, any idea of which order they're looking at? I saw the notes on or the dots on the map that way.
No, we've really not ordered them. Most of them are fairly minor. The 2 significant ones are going to be the 2 over the diversion channel. Those will be full approach slab replacements and expansion seal replacements, and so those will be more substantial. The other ones, a little bit less. Both of those also, I believe, have partial depth deck repair on those, where we've got some deck deterioration going on. Guardrail in both of those cases. But at this point, no, we've not had any conversation with the design team about how those might be phased, but that would be part of the conversation as we approach complete plans.
Are we doing that design in-house, or is that?
We are not. We are doing that design out of house.
Okay.
Steve, this is not, the question is not particularly related to the 1 and 6 here, but I did have a couple of people ask me over the recent snows, how's the microsurfacing holding up? Do you know, or I know Jim's not here this evening, but.
The microsurfacing is holding up very well.
Good.
You know, there's some areas we probably surfaced where we knew we had more potholing in some of our intersections. We microsurfaced that just to kind of hold that in place, and there is a plan as part of some of our maintenance reconstruction that we'll be replacing some of those intersections. But I would say overall, we're very pleased with that product and would anticipate seeing some more of that in appropriate locations.
Okay, thank you.
Steve, some of those maintenance reconstruction projects, Are those listed out anywhere for citizens to be able to see what's prioritized there?
Those are not. We have had conversation internally right now that as spring approaches, those would be areas, we need to go out and collect some survey data on that, identify those areas, and then we would be able to present that back. You know, right now, there's no construction scheduled until 2019 on that.
And questions we all get pretty regularly, I think, on so-called gap paving and some projects that we've talked about pretty
Yeah.
regularly in the past. How does that figure into?
There are, not included in that because we're going to be doing it this year, is there are 3 sections of gap paving that'll be done, and those are noted on the map in red. Georgia Avenue from First Street to Third Street, square turn, be south of Benjamin there, between Grant and Roosevelt, and then 15th from Hayes to Park. So those are 3 streets that we're currently on our list to get done this year. And I would anticipate being able to start construction probably midsummer on those.
Okay. And to recap on Benjamin, the majority of the design work on that project is being done throughout this year, correct?
Benjamin?
Yeah.
We have not started a search yet for a company to do that work.
But we'll initiate that process.
We would be initiating, let me pull up my schedule here.
1920.
Yeah, I would anticipate engaging a contractor about this time next year, or a consultant, excuse me.
And we have had some conversations to look at options to potentially accelerate the timeline on some of these projects, given the need throughout the community. So it's an ongoing conversation that we'll continue to have with the public on any avenues we have to do that. So,
Yeah.
any other questions for Steve?
Well, not so much a question as a comment, I know, because there's been a lot of discussion, talk about Prospect Avenue and how it had slid, and I'm glad to see that it's setting on up, you know, from what you noted, most of the design work is done. Next year at this time, looks like we'll get into some of the final stuff, and then construction and rework on that thing in 2021, so it's
Correct.
been a project that slid some because of necessity, but I think the residents along there, and since it has a lot of traffic that flows to the hospital that way, that it'll be a good thing when it happens. It just takes time.
And I think it's important to note too that we seek to leverage resources on these major reconstruction projects wherever we can. Brosh Avenue is a good example of some CDBG funds that will help get that project underway and starting construction next year. So that's a big one and a much needed one, so we look forward to getting that one off the ground. Anything else? This is a public hearing, so anyone wishing to make public comment can do so now. Okay, no further discussion. I will ask for a planning commission report. Please, Beth.
The Norfolk Planning Commission reviewed the City of Norfolk 2018-2023 1 and 6-year street improvement plan on February 6, 2018, and recommended approval of the plan on an 8-0 vote.
Okay, with that, I will close the hearing and look for a motion, move to item number 29, look for a motion to consider approval of resolution number 2018-9, approving the 2018 to 2023 1 and 6-year plan for street improvements.
Your Honor, I'd offer for consideration Resolution 2018-9.
Second.
Okay, motion is second. Any discussion, questions, comments, council? Seeing none, I'd ask for your vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, Resolution 2018-9 is adopted.
Okay, moving to item number 30, I will open this public hearing to consider amendment to Section 27-7 of the City Code to modify the tables contained therein, setting forth equivalent zones for unincorporated property that comes under the city's jurisdiction as a result of annexation or expansion of the city's extraterritorial zoning jurisdiction. Val, can you make that make sense for everyone, please?
You mean that didn't make sense? Yeah, thank you. There are some charts in our zoning chapter 27 that when we annex land, our extraterritorial jurisdiction also bumps out. And so when we take in Madison County or Stanton County land, we try to make it as easy as possible. So if it's ag in the county, it comes in as ag with us. If it's rural residential, it comes in rural residential. And so that's what's before you tonight. There's a couple areas of cleanup that was ag in county that came in as rural residential. So we're coming ag to ag or R1 to R1. So that's what we're trying to clean up before you today.
So Val, it's fair to say that this area applies to those that have come in within the jurisdiction because of annexations that the city has done. So the city's boundaries have grown, therefore the extraterritorial jurisdiction boundaries grow, and we match up, just seek to match up those new territories as they came to us with the county.
Right, and particularly since we've done a couple annexations this year, you'll see the extraterritorial jurisdiction coming before you to expand. It doesn't automatically expand, you'll see that come before you to be accepted, but yeah, we just try to make it as painless as possible for people. So if you were ag before, you're still ag in our zoning jurisdiction also.
Okay. Any questions for Val on that? Any comments? It is a public hearing. Anyone wishing to make comment can do so. No further discussion. We'll seek a planning commission report, please, Beth.
The Norfolk Planning Commission held a public hearing on February 6, 2018, to consider an amendment to Section 27-7 of the official city code to modify the tables contained therein, setting forth equivalent zones for unincorporated property that comes under the city's jurisdiction as a result of annexation or expansion of the city's extraterritorial zoning jurisdiction. The Planning Commission recommended approval on an 8-0 vote.
Okay, that closes this public hearing and moves us to item number 31. Look for a motion to consider ordinance number 5520, approving an amendment to Section 27-7 of the city code to modify the tables contained therein, setting forth equivalent zones for unincorporated property that comes under the city's jurisdiction as a result of annexation or expansion of the city's extraterritorial zoning jurisdiction.
Your Honor, I'd move consideration of ordinance number 5520.
Okay. Motion second. Any further discussion, comments on this, council? If none, short title, please, Beth.
An ordinance of the City of Norfolk, Nebraska to amend Section 27-7 of the official city code to modify the tables contained therein, setting forth equivalent zones for unincorporated property that comes under the city's jurisdiction as a result of annexation or expansion of the city's extraterritorial zoning jurisdiction, to provide when this ordinance shall be in full force and effect, and to provide for publication of this ordinance in pamphlet form.
Okay, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, ordinance 5520 carries on first reading.
Your Honor, I would move that we suspend the rules and pass ordinance 5520 on second and third reading, as to me, I see it more as a housekeeping situation than anything else.
Second.
Okay, motion and second to suspend the rules. Any discussion on that? If none, please vote.
Council members present voting in the affirmative, ordinance 5520 carries on second and third.
Okay, it moves us to item number 32. We'll open this public hearing to consider an amendment to sections 27-71, 27-72, and 27-74 of the city code to clarify the intended uses, and height and area regulations in District A, which is an agricultural district. And Val, would you kick off the discussion for us on this, please?
Yes, thank you. Little background on this. We did do our new comp plan almost a year ago, and I said, I'm hoping to change the whole zoning chapter in one fell swoop like we did 15 years ago. It's just too big for me to take on in one time. So hopefully you'll be seeing some of these come before you a little at a time. And so I just started with the first one, which was ag. And the changes before you, kind of the reasoning I would recommend this would be the new comp plan indicates 40 acre, 1 per 40 acre density in ag. Stanton, Mattis County also have that density in theirs. Agriculture as an industry is not necessarily getting smaller, it's getting bigger. And then having larger areas of land owned by a single entity tends to allow better, more principled land use of planning and growth as the city grows out. And then I think it might be easier also to try to limit sprawl and leapfrogging of development so that it's, like I said, it's a more principled way to expand the jurisdiction of our city limits.
Okay, thanks, Val. Any questions, comments for Val on that? This is a public hearing, so anyone wishing to make comment can do so now. Okay. Seeing no further discussion, move to Planning Commission report. Please, Beth.
The Norfolk Planning Commission held a public hearing on February 6, 2018, to consider an amendment to sections 27-71, 72, and 74 of the official city code to clarify the intended uses, and height and area regulations in District A agricultural, and the Planning Commission recommended approval on an 8-0 vote.
Okay, with that, I will close the hearing and move to item number 33. Look for a motion to consider ordinance number 5521, approving an amendment to sections 27-71, -72, and -74 of the city code to clarify the intended uses, and height and area regulations in District A.
Your Honor, I'd move consideration of ordinance number 5521.
Second?
Okay, motion is second. Any further discussion on this, council? If not, short title, please, Beth.
An ordinance of the City of Norfolk, Nebraska to amend sections 27-71, 27-72, and 27-74 of the official city code to clarify the intended use of an agricultural district, District A, to clarify that communication towers are not permitted uses in District A, and to amend height and area regulations in District A to provide when this ordinance shall be in full force and effect, and to provide for publication of this ordinance in pamphlet form.
Okay, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, ordinance 5521 carries on first reading.
Your Honor, I'd move that we suspend the rules and pass ordinance number 5521 on second and third reading.
Second.
Okay, motion and second to suspend the rules. Any further discussion? If not, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, ordinance 5521 carries on second and third readings.
Okay, item number 34, I will open this public hearing at the request of Vandelay Investments LLC to consider a zoning change from I-2 Heavy Industrial District to R3 Multiple Family Residential District on property addressed as 211 West Northwestern Avenue. And Val, would you again please kick off the discussion on this for us, please?
Yes, thank you. This is the depot building. I think everybody kind of knows it as that on Northwestern. It's just west of 2nd Street. The request for zone came in for R3 because they want to do apartments there and rehab the depot building. Zoning-wise, it is going from I-2 heavy industrial, and it will remain zoned on the east, south, and west sides as I-2, and then I-1 to the north across the street. And there is still an active rail yard that goes to the south of this also. And just a little spoiler alert that in the regular agenda, they do have a preliminary plan development that goes along with this too, because otherwise the R3 zoning wouldn't be functional without the relief of that plan development for the buffer yards.
Okay, thanks, Val. This is a public hearing, so anyone wishing to come forward to make comment can do so now.
My name is Ben Conover. This would be our
We
project.
have you sign in.
Oh, yeah.
Way up there. Sorry about that.
Oh, no problem. My name is Ben Conover. This would be our project. The last 3 or 4 years, we've purchased buildings in Pierce, two buildings in Tilden that we've successfully renovated, basically gutted to scratch and redid as beautiful apartments. We're working on a 4th building now in Madison that'll be 12 apartments, which is going to be about 18 months. The depot building, if we get approved, would take place after we get done with our next Madison project. In looking at the depot, initially not thinking it was going to be a viable project, probably looking at it for 6 months and looking at the existing zoning, kind of some of the stuff that I did, I went to all the industrial neighbors, talked to Alter Metal and the fertilizer place and the railroad. And after talking to them and hearing the support, gauged that it would be worth the time to go through the plan development. And looking at the depot as a structure, the way it's zoned right now, and we've drawn out preliminary second options if we have to keep the existing zoning. My guess is the entire facade, the structure would significantly change to where we wouldn't recognize it as the depot. So our hope is, if we're able to do the apartments as we've done on previous projects, we could preserve the aesthetic and the history and what we know is one of the very first buildings in Norfolk. So I'm open to any comments or suggestions or any questions. We hope to have 9 very high-end, possibly 10 very high-end apartments. There's about 9,500 square feet. The nice thing is it already has all the existing concrete, which makes it beneficial. The structure is very good. There's, the tuck pointing is very good. The roof, in all essence, is very good. So it's a good building for what we look for in doing our build-outs. But absolutely open to any questions.
Questions for Ben?
Ben, on the other projects that you noted in Pierce and Madison and Tilden, were any of them in industrial areas that way, zoning-wise?
They were not. The buildings that we bought previously have been downtown buildings where it's apartments up top, storefronts on the bottom, so we didn't have to work with any of the industrial issues at all. The one thing that kind of stuck out to me, initially is obviously the I-2. It's, you look at it on paper, it doesn't make a lot of sense. Everything south of the railroad is more the, the industrial. You got the fertilizer, you got Alter Metal, Husker Siding, and, everything north of the railroad. It's an I-2, but it's, more commercial. You get right across the street from where we're looking to do the depot. We have multifamily apartments that the Wappelhorse family owns, and so it's over there. I would even be interested, and I know we've had conversations on this, if we wanted to maybe look at doing a mixed purpose kind of area for that, just because there is no heavy industrial north of the railroad, even though that's the way it's zoned. It's all being operated on a different capacity. In the time frame we're looking at, just in our purchase agreement, we don't have time to do that for this, but on a longer term plan, I'd be happy to work with the city or the neighbors, if we wanted to come up with a different plan for that area.
And just as a reminder for everyone, that railroad is not a through track. It doesn't cross First Street. It's how much service is used there now by?
Yes, we've been looking at the building for 6 months. The same train, they basically just park a train there. My guess is if we go look at Google Maps and if we could go back in time, that train's probably been there for long enough to where the whole train track is rusty with no traffic. So the track doesn't go through. My guess is they probably park trains there from time to time and fix them or just store them, but there's no train track.
You did have some communication with the railroad?
I did. I called Julie with the railroad, who I got from she's the person that all the folks on the other side of the train track work with for, she said she had contacted all the people in Texas, the higher ups in the railroad, and that they would not have an issue with our project, you know, given that we had fencing, which we do in our PD on the back side of the building to have some kind of a buffer. And also the train that's sitting there is somewhat of a buffer as well, but we do have plans for the fencing on the back side to separate that as much as we can.
Can you kind of describe the fence plan, Ben, and talk about possible trespassing issues that may come up?
Yeah, so in our PD, and I think Karen will talk about it too, is on the east and the west side, which would be, the lumber yard, I think it's Farm and Ranch, and then Brad's Repair. We have 6-foot privacy fencing on both those sides, as well as some green space in between the privacy fencing and the concrete. On the back side of the building, which would be the corner of the building, to the east and west lot lines, we had a 6-foot privacy fence. The railroad asked us to make it 8, so we made it an 8-foot privacy fence. And on the front of the building, we anticipate having a decorative iron fence with a gated entry, where the tenants would have some form of, you know, a card or something they would swipe, which would allow them to come in. So we didn't have unanticipated people parking in the parking lot. So that's what we have in there now.
Okay. And it would be multi-family, families with children?
Yeah, we wouldn't discriminate just
Sure.
on all of our stuff, so it would be available to whoever would be appropriate to live there.
And in the PD, are there play areas in there? How do you propose to accommodate the little ones?
Yeah, so it's definitely limited on the green space, just because, you know, unless we want to tear up the concrete. On the west side, there's a pretty good area. I don't know how many feet it is. Karen probably has the dimensions. It's probably 30 feet of space between the concrete and where we'll have our privacy fence. So all that's going to be green with trees, and, you know, I don't know if we'll have a playground or not, but that would be an area where people could go outside and throw the football or kick the soccer ball, or it's actually a fairly large area, and that would have fencing on both sides of it to separate any other neighbors.
I'm obviously getting caught up on this, so I'm sorry if you've already addressed this. Is the building is it on any sort of historical registry, or do you have to follow any sort of guidelines for renovations?
It's surprisingly not on any register. We are working with an attorney on TIF financing and also possibly historical tax credits, so it doesn't mean that it won't be on the register at some point in the future, but at this point in time, it is not on any register.
But your plan is to preserve the facade?
Our plan is to preserve the outside just like we know it now. You know, there'll probably be some additional doors for apartments that we're gonna need to add, but we want to preserve specifically the outside as much as possible. You know, the inside has been pretty much just over renovations over the years. There's not a lot of original on the inside, with the exception of some of the wood pieces that we hope to repurpose into the apartments. But the outside, we hope to keep as much of that original as possible.
Okay, thank you.
What is, and maybe this is a question for Val, the current zoning to the north, across Northwestern Avenue, where you have a mix of commercial and residential? What is that block zoning?
It is zoned I-1 from Hendrick Street all the way across to Pine Industrial. That whole block strip is I-1 zoned.
So we have some residential multifamily within that.
Right, they would be non-conforming currently.
Probably a little more clarification on that, though, that residential that exists there actually exists in what used to be an old motel unit, which was probably associated with the rail yard when it was first developed there. And in lieu of it being torn on down, I think that's probably the only reason that it remains residential, that where it has that non-conforming residential in there. And I guess the other thing that I was noticing as I drove through it in that area, there is a fair amount of light industry in there. That's where B&A Welding is at. That's where T&M Electric is at. Major refrigeration. Those aren't really conducive, in my mind, to be supporting something more along a residential line here, short of that motel unit having been converted into apartments that way. So, did you give any consideration to anything other than residential with this development there?
I did. Our plan B would be is we would do mixed-use spaces where we would be adding garages and office space for contractors or people that are building things. In doing that, the whole front of the building would come off. There'd be garage doors. It would be a totally different structure, but that would be our plan B.
There is an element of mixed use there already, noting the things that Councilman Laney said, but you also have a bar and a civic organization headquartered there with the Fraternal Order of the Eagles. And so it's not in conformity in one thing or the other, as I see it, as it exists. Any further questions for Ben? Okay. Thank you. This is a public hearing, so anyone else wishing to make comment at this time can do so.
I'm Karen Larson with JEO Consulting Group, helping Ben with this project. We've done the plating on it. Just in this conversation, one clarification that I would like to make is that there will be no exit from the back of the building. Just, you know, when he said there'll be a fence in the back of the building, he meant that it starts on the side of the building, so the building is actually the barrier itself. And it's not as though you'll be able to step out of a door onto railroad tracks at all. I mean, there won't be any access from the building, and it'll be boxed in with a gated front fence. So I think it would be pretty private if you wanted it to be.
Question, Karen, and I'm not sure if your survey showed it or not, or where you're at on that. The south side of the structure itself, how far is it from the property line?
It is, actually the eave of the building encroaches on the property line. So, I mean, it's a depot building, and so it is right.
Right, that's
right on
kind of
the-
what I was trying to get established for the record, that it's basically a zero lot line construction that way. So, okay.
Thank you, Karen. Anyone else wishing to comment? Okay. No further comment. Planning Commission report, please.
The Norfolk Planning Commission held a public hearing on February 6, 2018, at the request of Vandalay Investments LLC to consider a zoning change from I-1 Heavy Industrial or I-2 Heavy Industrial to R3 Multiple Family Residential District on property at 211 West Northwestern. The Planning Commission approved the request on a 7-to-1 vote.
Okay, with that.
Your Honor, before we close it, just a piece of clarification, the letter that was laying on our desks out here, February 5th from the Union Pacific, that is part of the record, the public record? Okay.
Okay, yeah, I think that's found in your packets.
No.
Packet.
It wasn't in the
Didn't make
packet, but it was.
Okay. Okay, with that, I'll close the hearing and move to item number 35. Look for a motion to consider ordinance number 5522 approving a zoning change from I-2 to R3 on property addressed as 211 West Northwestern Avenue.
Your Honor, I would offer for consideration ordinance number 5522.
Okay, further discussion, council?
Well, Honor, I guess I would like to express my concern with this zoning change moving on forward on quite a few different counts that way. The first, and that's why I brought the letter up, that the Union Pacific specifically sent forward on this, and it wasn't quite as, I don't believe, quite as a shining endorsement of this rezoning as was testified to. For the record, a couple of the things that popped out to me as I was reading through it, in the second paragraph, it said that the proposed project location is adjacent to UP's property and railroad operations, and as Mrs. Larson noted, it's not only adjacent to it, it's the eve line actually overhangs the property line, so it's a zero lot line thing. They went on to further note that any land planning decision should consider that the train volumes near this project area may increase in the future, and that this is an active rail corridor and land uses should be compatible with this continuing rail use. They further go on to address the likelihood of trespassing if this were moved on forward. Again, it's all in there. And then a couple other things that were noted were the noise and vibration impact, that the daytime and nighttime noise levels naturally occurring with rail services, including sounding horns and vehicles, could be a problem that way. So at this point in time, yes, there is cars just stacked there, but I guess the thing that we need to remember is that this yard was there were many hundreds of thousands of dollars spent on it less than 10 years ago to make it accessible for storage of all types of cars that were there, not just necessarily these. We're coming up on the 10-year anniversary of a fairly large bond issue that the Railroad Transportation Safety District approved and has been paying on, that made these tracks and these side yards available for vehicles to be sitting on. And so at this point in time, yes, there isn't a whole lot there, but as we grow, if this gets turned into a residential situation, that doesn't change in 10 years from now. And if we're using it considerably heavier than what it is now, we're sitting there with a bad situation. I know very few residential lots, and Val, you'd have to help me, but I don't think that there are many that are zero lot lines other than where you have duplexes where you're allowed to be residential to residential, so not residential to industrial at, that way. So the other thing that concerns me is, to the largest cases, this is an industrial area. I cannot remember the numerous number of times that we've talked about, okay, we got to keep residential. We just went through that here in the last year to 2 years about residential encroaching on industrial areas, and now we turn back around and we have not only encroaching, we have it climbing inside of the industrial area. We have I-1 on the north side. We have, it's noted that there was residential in an apartment building there. Well, again, as I think that has occurred, is that was when this developed down there, that was a motel for the rail yard, and as the area is developed on out, that's the only use that it is at right now. I think this is a very poor and unwise decision for this body to allow this zoning change to move forward, and that being said, there is no way I could lend support to this. Now, if you ask me, okay, is it somewhat of a historical building? Yes, it is. have no problem with it having functioned in a commercial situation. We don't have people sleeping there in the evening time next to an industrial, or we have people coming and going there. We have, commercial and construction industries and other operations like that across the way. You yourself noted that there was a bar across the way. Got no problem with that. We don't have people sleeping there, or generally, we're not supposed to have people sleeping there. So, I think this is a very, very, very poor zoning change.
The letter that Councilman Langy noted is for all the council members. That was received within the last week. Knowing of this concern, staff did have contact with the local railroad that actually uses the line. And Andy, can you give some background on your communication with the local railroad on this, please?
Sure, Mayor. I did speak with Mr. Trace Meyer. He's with the Nebraska Central Railroad office in Texas at the main headquarters. I didn't get a whole lot of information on future plans. I did ask about that, but he didn't have a whole lot to share at this point of what their future plans would be. For right now, there's just a lot of different industries that they just store cars here. They allow them to as they need to. He mentioned, obviously Nucor, Norfolk Iron and Metal, even some of the other industries. He said most of the activity is further to the west. Once you get closer to the viaduct, is where most of the activity is. This is really just an area for unused cars that need some maintenance, some different, they transloading. If they just need to place some cars in a certain place, he said that's really the limit of the activity that they have right now. I did ask about, I told him about this project and the plans. We did discuss that a little bit. I didn't really get a feel for support or being against it either way. I didn't sense a strong no or no, absolutely not, this is going to hurt us in some way. It was just very, very matter of fact, really what their plans are. But he is aware of the project. So I don't have a whole lot of other information to share, but that's really what the use is for today. But obviously, as we all know, who knows what will happen down the road. Really, that's, we just make the best decision we can. So that was the extent of my conversation with Nebraska Central Railroad.
Speaking of future planning for the area, there has been some internal discussion about mixed-use development within this area of town, given the historic nature of Norfolk Junction. Can you talk a little bit about how a neighborhood such as this could lend itself to that kind of future land use planning?
Sure. I think that the fact that it is a unique historical area, and I think a lot of communities run into this at certain points in time. Val can step in here from a community planning standpoint, but we're going to see these conflicts happen, and you decide where do you want to send this? How unique do you want to look at this neighborhood? I think if you look at that street, it was made for the railroad. It was designed for, so you would have had people that would live there. You'd have businesses there, stores there, any kind of industries that might be there, because that's where it all focused. The railroad was there. That's where everybody had their business, and that's where everybody chose to live. So, but that also makes it a unique area. I think from a community development standpoint, it does lend itself to be a unique area, a district, if you would. I do think that planning it correctly and making it as best you can to balance out the industrial uses we have there, engaging all those businesses that are in the area, and having that conversation overall to create a mixed-use district would include a lot of parties and a lot of people to talk about it, to find out what we all want to see. But certainly it is a unique area. So I understand both, the aspect that this is bordering an industrial area and a rail yard. But at the same time, we do have an opportunity for revitalization of a building in a neighborhood that otherwise would go away, essentially, from what the developer's stating, that it would completely change. So, yeah, I wish there was an easy solve to this from a planning standpoint, but it's really just a direction, decide what direction we want to go in. Certainly, there is a lot of opportunity for redevelopment here, and I think it does create that unique district, but at the same time, we do have existing uses that are down there. So I really don't have a concrete answer. I don't know, Val, do you, from a planning standpoint, do you have any other comments you'd want to offer on that for when you have these two uses that come together, and where we go from there, and how, if you've ever worked with any other communities or seen this, where this happens?
Industrial and residential are always a hard mix, and like you said, how do you want this to go? I mean, do you really feel that this, if you feel it's more of an industrial use right now, do you feel that it will go in a different direction if you do a mixed-use overlay on top of this? I mean, do you think that some of the houses or the apartments will go away and more industry will come in, or the industry will leave because now people have a chance to do houses right there? I mean, it's a very difficult area because it was kind of a downtown that had that railroad there. That the railroad has changed, I think, over the years too, because we use the railroad now to transport goods, whereas before it's how people got around. So there, it made sense to have an apartment or a business right next to the railroad, but is it the best place to have that right now, because that use has changed also? I don't know that that really helps you, other than gives you some questions to think about as you consider this.
So they haven't parked any horses down there for a while?
Luckily, no.
Yeah. So, Andy, discussing the possibility of a district, if you will, change or something like that, are you implying in any way that we're jumping the gun on this decision, that maybe it's something that should be discussed and thought about a little further before we go in and attempt to change this?
Not necessarily. We did visit with Mr. Conover about this, and, you know, we talked about the mixed-use district and how we could handle that. But that is a very big conversation to have. That involves a lot of people to determine that and put that mixed-use district together and what that would look like. And it involves a lot of work with the Planning Commission, a lot of work from elected officials to decide what direction we want to go, so we can put in safeguards and make sure that the neighborhood were to develop, I guess, is the way we want it to as a community. So, but I think that time frame to get that done was different than what Mr. Conover was looking for. So we discussed this, and his choice at that time was to pursue this current zone change you have before you today, because that's the road he had been going down. And I think, you know, I think he wanted to see how that conversation went, simply because the conversation for a mixed-use district would be a lot more time to put that together. So we did have those conversations as a staff with Mr. Conover, and they were all good discussions. So a lot of these questions, you know, came up, and we talked about a lot of these things as well. So that's the extent of our conversations on mixed use.
I'd just like to say that I do agree with some of the things Jim has said, and I do think that there is a time to change. I mean, we have some industry south of there. We do have quite a few apartments north of there and some housing that goes up every street over there. It's probably not the best place to put this, but it is a good place to maybe get started if we are going to look at that. And I don't think that's one of our heavy industrial places right now. I think we're building industrial tracks out by Volcraft. We've been fighting to keep that area industrial. North of town, we've got some industrial tracks. So I think we've been focused on some of them. I don't think that's a good place for industry, even though it was back in the day. So it might be time for a change. I'd like to maybe support it tonight and get more input from the public on second and third reading to see what's going on. But I agree with some of Jim, but I disagree that maybe it is time we look at some other stuff, help that area of town grow and change a little. So I'm a little mixed on it. I'm probably going to support it tonight, but we'll have to see how it goes.
I think those are fair points, Councilman. Though the zoning designation now is for heavy industrial, you do not see heavy industrial there right now. And to me, the likelihood of heavy industrial growing up there, that time has passed. We have to consider the most prudent use of land use as we move forward. And again, this is an inactive rail line. I drove by there earlier today. Those cars haven't moved for God knows how long.
No.
It's inactive. It would be a major, major investment to make that active again. Without, I think, the justification of growing industry in that area. We are growing industry, but it's not there. And for future planning, as we underwent the process in the comprehensive plan, was not in that area. You identified some of the areas. Northeast is likely where industry is going to grow and where we're putting major infrastructure investments right now to help accommodate that growth. So I think the decision before us tonight is not looking back to 100 years as to what this was, but looking into the future as to what it can be and what is best for revitalization of a historic neighborhood like that in our community.
Back in the mid-'80s, it was called the Depot. It was a restaurant, it was a bar, kind of a nightclub type operation. And I think there was a lot more traffic than if we're talking 9 or 10 units, having 18, 20 cars, and any given Saturday night or Friday night, there was a lot more cars running around the area at that time, back in the mid-'80s, when that was a restaurant establishment.
And I guess, as I noted, I don't have a problem with it being commercial or something along that line. I have a terrible, terrible problem with it being residential. And I heard that, we aren't making a major investment down there. We made a major investment. Less than 10 years ago, we made a very major investment. We made that entire east side accessible, which it was not. We had, and Randy would remember some that way, but it was a large bond issue that opened that area back up. So I cannot believe that we're gonna say, okay, we made this kind of investment there for the rail so that they would be able to put cars back in there when they needed to, and now we're saying, oh, tough luck. I cannot believe that we can look at that major investment that we asked not only the city of Norfolk and not only the Madison County Railroad Transportation Safety District to make there and the UP to go along with, but we did a major investment, and maybe a lot of us don't remember that or weren't involved at it, but that's one of the things that comes along, and the bonds are just finally getting paid off. So.
And again, I don't disagree with you, Jim, but it is the end of the line. They can't go across the street there on First Street. It's the end of it.
It is not, the tracks have been removed from going across First Street, but they still own the land to the east.
Well, that's true. And I haven't seen, like Andy said, I haven't seen any indication of any cars moving for years, and that doesn't mean they're going to. But I don't see it going that way for industrial, because I think they leave that option open in case an industry opens there, bang, we got railroad to them. But I don't see industry going in that area because we've got other industrial tracks. That's all I'm saying, so.
My biggest problem is that if we allow residential in there and then that has to expand or that moves forward, because UP is not going to give that land up.
Yeah.
And so
And maybe-
that's going to be there. And so we're going to have residential, and we're talking a short time period here. Those cars moved in there within the last 4 years. And the only reason I know that is because for the longest time, that was one of my major courses getting to where my office was at that time. But again, the Nebraska Central was fairly non-committal on what they were or weren't going to do. The UP is quite committal on, okay, and they're, the UP is that own the land. It's not the Nebraska Central Railroad that owns it. Nebraska Central merely leases it from them.
I think I'd like to add that the commercial businesses that are there, obviously those businesses are not right on that lot line. And obviously don't have people there day and night. Residential with,
Corey, I would beg that the auto garage there has cars parked up right to the train cars.
true. Cars are different than a building in my thoughts here.
I mean, there's,
Very, very true. But I'm thinking on the worst case scenario, if industry does expand, they need more areas to store cars, rail cars. These may have been sitting here for 4 years, but we can't tell the future of what can move in and out. As industry may grow, as more cars may need to be stored, and people living right next to a railroad track that has any possibility at any certain time that a rail car falls over, even on a rusty old track, that anything can happen. And the last thing you'd want is somebody hurt if a rail car falls over in the middle of the night, and what are they gonna do? I obviously haven't lived through this as long as Jim has to know the past or the history down here, but I would say I have a hard time saying that I agree with residential people living that close to a railroad track, even if it's not used as often as it ever was.
I would note there's instances throughout the community where we have had to manage that residential areas are close to a rail line and commercial areas are close to a rail line. I work by one every day and hear the train coming through. This, again, is an inactive line right now. Could change in the future. Industry growing there. Who knows? We've had large industrial tracks in that area sitting idle for years and years, regardless of major investment. So does industry grow there in the future? I don't know, but I don't think that in the current time we shut down opportunities to revitalize neighborhoods because we're hopeful that some mysterious industry develops, materializes where it hasn't for a number of years.
Ben, was your Plan B predicated on industrial growth down there?
What do you mean by predicated on industrial growth?
Well, if it were not to pass for residential, you have Plan B, which basically is contractor offices and those types of things. I'm assuming you would think there would be enough industrial growth or whatever to necessitate that they would need those offices and would therefore be a good project for you?
Ben, you can come forward, please.
Yeah.
I'm still learning the process. I appreciate your patience.
Sure.
I know in some areas, like I have clients in Springfield, Nebraska, or in Omaha, Nebraska, where they will build these offices as workspaces for contracts. That would be a Plan B. The building is good, the concrete is good. There's a lot of value in that building. In saying that, the roof is going bad. There's a lot of places that need fixed substantially. And if somebody, because that building's been sitting there for 2 years, if somebody doesn't come in and fix those issues now, the problems will be huge problems. Where now is there fairly minor problems on a structural basis. But I would anticipate if we did that we would have people that would rent them. being somewhat emotionally attached to these buildings and enjoying bringing them back to what they are. You know, I get probably too roped into the, you know, I like the historical aspect, and I look at the old pictures of this building, and it would be a shame, you know, but if we do not do this, somebody is gonna either tear that building down or they're going to use it for something probably not ideal. But that's, I would anticipate there would be a need for it.
Okay, thank you.
Andy, is that on Oak Street, the city we bought, or we gave those lots up and we're putting like 4 or 5 houses there, just right along Clark Brothers there, just, I mean, they're, those lots butt up right against that railroad line too. Is that Oak? I mean, there's houses, we're putting houses right next to railroad lines right now.
And we're putting houses, we're putting houses next to railroad lines, we're not putting houses next to railroad yards, storage yards. Significant difference. So,
Dick, I look at that as it's, that there is houses or there is yards that are abutting against that rail yard, but they're safe enough distance away that if something did happen to a rail car, it's not landing on a house. Where this is in close proximity of where those rail tracks are. Closer than what a backyard, I mean, a house is with a backyard distance to the rail line, I think.
Further discussion, council? Val, can you recap some of the planning commission discussion on this? I think the vote, if I remember correctly, was 7-1 recommending the zone change. Can you summarize some of the discussion at planning commission on this?
Some of the discussion was, it is close to a rail yard. That was the reason that the one commissioner said he could not support it. The others were, I think the planning commission got caught up in the mixed use potential, that if the mixed use went through, they wouldn't have such an issue with having R3 in there. So I think, not knowing their complete thoughts of why they voted, but my guess is that they voted yes on this because potentially the mixed use was going to happen. But there, I mean, there's no guarantee on that, and that mixed use process, it would be the city essentially writing their own zoning district for that area. So you would have to set your own buffer yards and setbacks and uses, and it would essentially be writing your own zoning district just for whatever boundary you would choose. So that's why when Andy said it's not a quick thing to turn around, you're writing your own zoning district.
Which is in place, though, for modernizing and accommodating what may have already developed in an area as mixed use. I believe that to be the case in terms of why we have that designation.
It's been in our zoning district, our zoning code, I think since the last time you guys did the full redo 15 years ago. No one has ever used it. It says in our code that it can be either an overlay, kind of like a PD overlay, or its own base district. And so this would have to be its own base district because it's just too complicated to be an overlay. And so it can go either way. I mean, you can try to put that in something existing, I suppose, and make it fit in there. Or it's something that if you're doing a brand new district, it would be something much easier to deal with if you were doing something brand new.
Any further discussion, council? All right, short title, please, Beth. Oh, okay. Then if no further comment, I would ask for your vote. I don't know if you've read it already. No.
I haven't read the short title.
I thought you just said, yeah, short title.
An ordinance of the City of Norfolk, Madison County, Nebraska, amending the zoning district map of the City of Norfolk, Nebraska, providing when this ordinance shall be in full force and effect, and providing for publication of this ordinance in pamphlet form.
Okay, now please vote.
Voting in favor of the zoning change, Councilmember Dahlketter, Murin, Faust, File. Voting against the change, Granquist, Langy, Merrill.
Motion. Clarify that, please, Bob.
Yeah, you need 6 votes.
No. You don't have a protest, do you?
Oh, no, we don't have.
You need
okay,
5
we need
votes.
5
You
votes.
need 5 votes to advance it, and you have 4 votes for that, so that means that it's not a tie, but the mayor gets to determine whether he wants to cast the vote to give the 5th vote to make it a majority and pass it on first reading.
So it requires 5 votes, and in this case, the mayor can vote. I'll vote yes.
And then the ordinance passes on first reading. Ordinance 5522 passes on first reading with your vote.
All right, that moves us to the regular agenda. Item number 36, look for a motion to consider approval of letter agreement amendment number 1 with Olson Associates for the South Water Main Loop project for an amount of $18,145.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Okay, motion and second. Steve?
Mayor and Council, this amendment is for the addition of a sewer main replacement. This is because we're going to be in there with the water loop project, it's going to extend water to the south across the river. We wanted an opportunity to add to the Olson's contract the replacement of a 21-inch VCP sewer line that was installed somewhere back in the 1890s. After the 2010 flood, we had 2 trunk sewer line collapses over in that area just west of the plant. HDR was brought on to do a remediation study. This project was categorized as a high need. It is in our budget as a priority A budget item for this year. And again, rather than go back in there under a separate contract, separate bid documents, and disrupt traffic on First Street again, we just thought it makes sense to add this to Olson's contract and do all that work for the water main and the sewer main in one contract.
Okay, very good. Any questions for Steve? Okay. If no discussion on that, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative.
All right, item number 37, look for a motion to consider resolution number 2018-10, approving the preliminary plan development on property addressed as 211 West Northwestern Avenue at the request of Vandelay Investments, LLC. And to open the discussion on this, Val, can you give us a little bit of information on the plan development? Oh, still looking for a motion, I'm sorry.
I'd offer for consideration Resolution 2018-10.
Second.
Okay. Val, please.
Okay. So Clint and I just had a discussion that we feel that you can move forward with the preliminary plan development because it's not the final yet. It's a guideline to help you move on to the final if the zone change does not go through on second and third reading eventually, then the final plan development would not be able to, but just to let you know why we're being able to move forward. So the plan development, like I mentioned in the zone change, that because this is a residential zoning going in amongst industrial, there are 100-foot buffer yards on the east, south, and west, and a 40-foot buffer yard to the north. And so the buffer yards alone would eat up the whole lot, essentially, that nothing could be there with this new zoning. So to allow the use of this to be apartments with the R zoning, a plan development needed to be proposed because the plan development would give relief from the subdivision regulations from the buffer yards on all 4 sides being down to 0 feet. Granted, the fence height restriction on the front yard is 4 feet right now. You'd be allowed to go to a 6-foot. Relief granted from the required depth of landscaping adjacent to the street property line. Currently, there is not the 12.5 feet of required landscaping in the front yard because it's paved over for the parking lot. And then the other one would be relief granted from the required minimum rear yard setback to allow the 0 yard setback since it's there. And so that's why the PD is before you to grant that relief, to allow this current building to be repurposed with an R3 zoning.
Okay. Any questions? No? Discussion on that, council? Okay, if not, please vote.
Voting in favor of Resolution 2018-10, Councilmembers Dahlketter, Murin, Faust-File. Voting against the resolution, Rehnquist, Lange, and Merrill.
I will vote yes.
And Mayor votes yes, so Resolution 2018-10 is adopted.
Okay, with that, we will move to administrative reports. Item number 38, our Public Safety Annual Report from Public Safety Director Shane Widener.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'm honored and pleased to present the annual Public Safety Department annual report. Actually, the report's broke down on the fiscal year, and that's to coincide with our fiscal year as we develop our budgets and look at what the Public Safety Department is doing for their resources that you so honorably give us and the community gives us. We like to put those numbers together with the fiscal report. So it's not an annual report in the essence that it's a calendar report. It's in a fiscal year yet. We could sure put together an annual report if you'd rather see that's on the calendar year, but we are trying to I get asked that a lot. That was my idea to do the fiscal year report because it corresponds with going right into budget season here pretty quick and we start to prepare those numbers. So as you know, I'm sure you know, the Public Safety Department gives this community, an honor to give this community a full array of public safety services. And they do it with a wonderful staff that I'm very proud to be able to be a part of. You're going to hear about some of those numbers and hear about some of the services that we provide. Chiefs both told me they would keep it short, but we'll be happy to answer any questions that you guys got from in between the three of us. I will say that I can honestly look you or anyone else in the eye and say that your public safety personnel, to a person, are very well trained and very well prepared to respond to whatever emergencies may present themselves now and in the future for this city. So I'm honored to say that they do an outstanding job. Since alphabetical order come up, as far as fire, then police, Chief Portis, if you want to give them some numbers and some of the skinny on fire, that'd be great. And then
thank you, Shane. Mayor and Council, I will attempt to be brief. I'm going to highlight a few things. Obviously, this document has all kinds of statistics. I don't need to repeat those for you. The first thing I stand before you every year and talk about is the ability to stand here 1 year later and proudly say that no serious injury or death has come to a member of the fire department. That seems perhaps routine to say that, but it's something that I should never take for granted. It is my greatest responsibility is to protect the assets of this community, and those men and women that make up the personnel that drive those shiny trucks up and down the street are the most important part of my job. And so when I can say that, it's been a good year. And so I'm proud when we can get to that place and not have to report any tragedy in that regard. We are fully staffed. We've got 2 retirements this year. Those slots have been filled. Our reserve staff is also full. Just took on a complement of 6 recruits that began in December. And so they're going through their training right now, and that complement that hovers right around 30 is full as we speak. Our turnover, fortunately, has been very, very low, and I'm proud that we have a long-standing group of fine men and women that are serving the community right now. Statistically this year, our fire call totals was just the same as it was a year ago, exactly to the number. Our medical calls, bucking a national trend, actually decreased slightly this year, which is something that I was happy to see. And in my effort to be boastful and talk about that really loud and be in the consequences, the good consequences that come from that, I was punished by January being the busiest month in the history of the Norfolk Fire Department. And so our fiscal year went well, and January became the worst reported total emergency calls for service in the history of the fire department. And so I need to be quiet and stop being boastful in my proclamations about that. But we continue to watch those numbers and try to provide the service within the best of our abilities within those very unpredictable service response totals that we simply have to address as they come. And so we'll keep you informed on that as we go forward. We took delivery of a new rural fire apparatus this year, a rural tanker, 2,000-gallon tanker, paid for in full with our contract from the Rural Fire Board. Has been in service and serving the community well, and the Rural Fire Protection District well. And as you know, we just made approval of the purchase of a 100-foot aerial device that will be the single greatest apparatus purchase also in the history of the fire department. And we're grateful from the support of this body to get that truck in the process of being built. It's, I hope to be here a year from now telling you it's almost done. It's a little over a year to build that big shiny truck, and that process has begun. The final approvals on all those documents have been put in place, and so the clock now begins to tick as we move forward to what hopefully is the delivery of that truck about a year from now. So we'll hopefully keep that on task. A lot of activity in here regarding the permits and emergency management elements of the organization. Good folks doing good work in difficult circumstances, certainly, and lots of statistics that drive that home. One of the things that I noticed was we issued the most building permits since 2006 last year. So there was activity in that regard, which often we look to as a positive indicator for growth and opportunities in the community. So there's a lot of other statistics I'm not going to bore you with. I do want to take this opportunity while I'm here to thank the other city divisions that support the fire department and make us work, specifically the police division, which is, as you all know, the 911 center. The origin of those emergency calls are born there and deliver us safely to the destination that we're all about. And so we're grateful for our partners over at the police division as well as all the other city divisions. Certainly supportive, appreciate the support of Lyle and Shane and Andy and all the endeavors that they have to endure to make us be successful. And then lastly, and I say this often, when the community asks me, Chief, do you get the tools that you need to do the job? Are you provided the resources that you need to serve this community in the manner that you see fit? And my answer is always without hesitation, yes. And that's because of this body. You're good stewards of the taxpayers' money, and you give us the tools we need to do our job. We don't want for much in providing the equipment and the apparatus and the training opportunities that we need to serve this community in a manner they deserve. And honestly, that begins and ends with you giving us those resources. So on behalf of the 70 men and women approximately that make up the full and part-time staff at Norfolk Fire, I extend our sincere appreciation to all of you. And I'm proud to say that we have the opportunity to serve you all. And so we will do the best to be here a year from now and reporting in a positive manner for the good work of those individuals. So thank you for your time and your listening. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief, for your work, and thank you to the work and dedication of all our firefighters. At the risk of jinxing things by talking about good news, most building permits since 2006 and medical calls being down, both very good things. Great. Welcome, Chief.
Mayor, members of the council, it is a privilege and an honor to be able to present our police division annual report to you and to the community this evening. You know, being the last person on the agenda means that no matter what I say, you're going to get out of here. So I'm going to trust that you have looked at the report that was in your agenda. A couple of things I will point out. Overall, our calls for service went down. We went down a little over 2.5% in total calls for service. Our criminal-related calls for service and our traffic-related calls for service went down over 7%. And I think that's good news. I can't say that it's what the police division did. I think it was a combination of citizens working with us, us being out there and responding to calls, and happening to find some things on view. But it was a cooperative effort that allowed us to see that happen. So I will not say the police division gets the credit for it. I think the community really gets the credit, the way that they work with us, they support us, and they don't call us, we're not able to go out and deal with some of those things. So I give kudos to them. I do want to point out that our officers had just under 10,000 contacts as far as law enforcement contacts. Our jail held 689 prisoners during the year that we had here. And that may seem like a lot, but that's actually kind of a reduction over what we've had in previous years. So maybe people are being nicer, more law-abiding. We kind of hope that that's what's going on there. But it's not just law enforcement. During this period, officers and personnel of the division made 65 presentations to community groups and schools and that type of thing. Anywhere from active shooter training to officer friendly, and showing young kids at Head Start what the officer looks like, what the car looks like. All of that promotes the idea that we work together and we help each other out there. Scott mentioned about the 911 center, and if you didn't happen to notice it there, I would like to just draw your attention to that. When you look at what they do, they pick up the phone, they answer the phone, they dispatch an officer to that call. But if you look over this period, this 12-month period that this report is for, they received 8,502 911 calls during that period. They also received 44,477 non-emergency calls during that same period. So there are some periods when the phone is not ringing, but there's a lot of periods when the phone is ringing and they're answering and sending fire and police and whatnot to these calls. So they really are the glue that kind of holds us together. They're the connection between the citizen who needs help and the officers or fire rescue people that are going to respond. And so I want to point that out. Another one that I'd like to point out that you don't often hear much about, and that's our school resource officer. People probably don't really know what that officer does during the course of his year when he's working in the school system. He's assigned to the high school. He does spend time at the junior high, also at the middle school, and every once in a while at one of the grade schools. When they need some assistance or help, he will respond and assist them with that. He was involved in, and this number is kind of hard to believe, 2,068 student interventions during the course of that 9 to 10 month or 9 months in the school. Now, these aren't all law enforcement things. The vast majority of these are discipline interventions. He also assists the school in working with their code of conduct. He makes presentations to a lot of the classes on a variety of subjects. He does oversees the lunch period. He oversees the outside of the building in the morning before and the school afterwards. And he spends a lot of his time going to the extracurricular activities. You'll see him at the football game. You'll see him at some of the parent-teacher conferences. You'll see him at some of the other athletic activities that are there. So he stays very busy. He also is a police officer. And so of those 2,000 and some odd interventions, he did have 83 law enforcement cases, and he ended up writing 73 citations as a result of that. He stays very busy, and we really appreciate the work that he does there. With that, I'm ready to go home. I don't know about you, but I will ask you if you would have any questions for either Scott or I as regarding our report here.
I would have one comment for Chief Cordes, and I noticed that in the Prevention Bureau this year, we have an additional 29 building permits. I think it might be time to change the name of the Prevention Bureau to the Promotion Bureau. But nice job. Chief, I appreciate your comments tonight, and that your staff is doing a terrific job, as certainly as Chief Cordes has as well. So we thank you very much for that.
Added that. Thank you, Chief, for your work and dedication to all your officers, not only in the day-to-day of keeping us safe, but the things you mentioned in terms of community engagement, integrating the officers in the community and the work of our community service officers. I think it's very important to some of these trends, hopefully, that we're seeing in terms of fewer calls and fewer incidents throughout the community. So, thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for your support. I want to echo what Scott said. You give us the resources and materials to be able to do the job. And we have never lacked for your support. We always know we can count on your support, just as we've been able to count on the community's support. So on behalf of the men and women of the police division, thank you very much for all you do for us and the assistance that you give us. Thank you.
Chief, I want to thank you and Scott both. You do a great job. I think you do a great job every year, and I want to thank Shane, who took on a new position, and I think he's getting everything together, and I think our plan is working out really good with him kind of overseeing things and working with you guys. So I think all of you are doing a great job.
Thank you.
Yep.
Well said. All right. All right. With that, this concludes the, what is it, February 20th, 2018 meeting of the Norfolk City Council. Good evening.
Right.